Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav network. Ton of podcasts over on Bleav. Go check it out. Joining me is co-host Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism between the two of us. Later in the show, we answer a couple of Astros questions. Which recent call-up are we most excited about, and which starters have us in a good mood? But first, Stephen, did anything strike you about the Texans-Steelers game? You and I haven't gotten together between the two of us, so I'm just kind of curious about that, or any big picture stuff with the Texans, period.
Well, I was just glad the game wasn't called because of rain this time. I mean, that's a victory right there. And
yeah,
the Texans did end up winning. Not that it really matters, but you want to see specific guys do well. And I was really glad to see Tank Dell make that touchdown catch. I mean, we kept seeing, or at least hearing, how well he'd been doing in practice and how well he'd done in OTAs, but you don't really know until you suit up and get out in a preseason game. So I'm not really worried about the top receiving core. CJ, I'm not really worried about him. I think he was, 2 for 4, but he's going to be fine. John Mechie concerns me, though, and I know we've talked about that before, and the receiver room is certainly one of the more competitive positions. And, you feel with guys like John Mechie, they might just be on the bubble, certainly is on the bubble, and may even be on the way out. I would like to see more from him. But the Texans running game is, and I know it's something we'll probably get to. Joe Mixon's not in there, but really nobody behind him has stepped up and really made a positive impression. So, that's something to kind of keep in mind too as this preseason rolls along.
Yeah, and if for some reason you missed our post-game show, I talked about the fact that, look, Mechie looks like the last guy in the receiving room right now. So he gets released if everybody's healthy, but yeah, it tends to go this way. Not everybody's healthy. I don't worry about having too much of a position because it's the NFL and there are injuries.
Yeah, you always want to have that kind of a good problem. I mean, if you could have it at every position, that'd be great. Usually your teams are not so lucky, but the receiver room is certainly one place where you've got that.
Now, Stephen, I picked out 3 of the best training camp storylines for the Texans so far. And it's been more good news than bad, so I figured I'd go glass half full. I know some of my fans will say, "Oh, that's not you, Robert. What are you talking about?" But yeah, I'm going glass half full. Actually, most of this show I'm going glass half full. And let's start with the number 1 best Texans camp storyline, and it's Cade Stover. He's got 5 catches, 58 yards, but even more impressive, 35 of his 58 yards were after the catch, which should get D'Amico's attention. He loves that. And Stephen, if you look at the other draft picks from this class, Stover is the only one who's excelled during the preseason games. Until I see more Kamari outside of practices and healthy, which he's not now, right. Cade Stover is the headliner.
Yeah, I mean, Blake Fisher's been starting in place of Laramie Tunsil, and, he hasn't really flashed that much. Of course, those are real big shoes to fill. And, Cade Stover, I mean, we heard about him when he was drafted and coming out, with the Ohio State connection with him and CJ. So that certainly has to help. And CJ even talked very highly of him, I think, before the Texans drafted him. So it's good to see that coming to fruition, at least through these first couple of games. And yeah, you mentioned Kamari Lassiter. Yeah, we were hoping to see a lot more from him, but him not being healthy, well, you can't shine unless you get on the field.
It's mostly Davis Mills catching Cade Stover open.
That's true.
And so it's not even CJ, in fact. And let's go to my number 2 best Texans camp storyline. Did you have one, by the way, Stephen? Did you have one that's really you're thinking about?
Well, I mean, Cade Stover was on my list too. I guess nothing's really jumped out at me, I would say. I think there have been more disappointments. I'm kind of taking the glass half empty thing on a couple of things, Robert. So go ahead, keep it positive, and I'll chime in on that and bring up a couple of my negative points.
My number 2 best Texan camp storyline, everybody loves Stephon Diggs as a leader and a locker room presence. The only thing with Diggs was if he'd upset chemistry, and that's not the case. Tank Dell said, quote, "We always ask him questions, or we don't even have to ask questions. He'll just come up and start talking about stuff he's seen when he was with the Vikings or in Buffalo, and he's just given us game," unquote. And look, Stephen, diva receivers don't throw their hands up in celebration when another receiver catches a touchdown like Diggs did with Tank Dell on Friday.
Yeah, that's very true. But, Robert, here's the thing with Stephon and players like him. I think it's the long term is going to determine what kind of a teammate he's going to be. Now, yeah, you asked Tank Dell, you asked D'Amico Ryans. None of them are worried about him, but it's still new. And what I think the big test is going to come is, let's say the Texans hit a rough patch and they start losing, or Diggs isn't getting the ball as much as he thinks he should. Those have been the traits that he's exhibited both in Minnesota and where he was before. So, with both in Buffalo. So I think you're going to, right now, sure, everything is new, exciting. You haven't gotten to the regular season yet. And listen, I hope it keeps up like that, because you need a guy like Stefon Diggs, not just to continue his Pro Bowl pace that he's been on practically every season, but you want that kind of attitude to permeate on the team and rub off on those guys.
And look, he's not only spent time working on some drills, but also relationships with teammates. He and Stingley worked mirror drills and coverage one day after practice. Another day, he showed Mechie some techniques for working against DBs. And Steven, when Stroud ended practice on a bad note during 11-on-11, Diggs stayed after with Stroud to run extra routes. So, he's trying to help guys. This is real leadership, like stuff that you just didn't think of when you heard what Diggs had done in Buffalo.
Another thing D'Amico Ryans pointed out too, I think a lot of it depends on how you treat the player. And listen, D'Amico Ryans is living up to his billing, not just as, a head coach with wins and losses in his first season, but the type of guy he is. I think, he treats every player the way they want to be treated. And, you can't treat everybody the same, obviously, but D'Amico just knows how to handle players. And I think that is also going to play a big part in how Stefon Diggs and his attitude, can remain positive. One of mine, and this may be your third, Robert, but I'd say one of my positives is the defensive line. And, in particular, we still had some questions about it, especially with D'Amico Autry being suspended. I mean, Mario Edwards, he played a pretty good game. And, in some parts of the line, and you're thinking of Will Anderson Jr. and how those guys are coming along. So the Texans defensive line, I think they're making some good stands in these first couple games.
Yeah, Fatukasi flashed the last game. We know what Danico Autry can bring once he gets back, and
Danielle Hunter too is coming. Those two, him and Anderson, are definitely going to be the 1-2 punch of that line right now.
Yeah, Danielle, that's another. Obviously, like he's like a robot. Apparently, looks like a transformer to the guys with his shirt off. So he brings his body and his really good play, which is kind of fun. Well, my number 3 best Texans camp storyline has to be Xavier Hutchinson, and I mentioned this in the post-game show as well. But there's a couple of reasons I'm really excited about him. It's not just 6 catches for 60 yards during the preseason. It's not just the trust he's garnered with Bobby Slowick with the jet sweeps Bobby loves to run with Xavier, which I feel like is an advantage that he has among the back end receivers that are trying to make the roster. But what's so huge, Steven, while John Mechie could be a second round whip by Caserio made up for it with Xavier in this 6th round, who is incredibly cheap because he is a 6th rounder. And Steven, he's only going to be making about $1 million per year for the next 3 seasons.
Well, that's going to be a big deal too when it comes down to cut time, is not only, what can you do for us on the field, but cap space is something you always have to think about. And look, I've always liked Xavier Hutchinson. I've been rooting for him to do well. He had that really good first game against the Bears in the Hall of Fame game. Maybe not quite as many catches, but he still looked good. And, he can do some things on special teams too if you need him.
Any other big thoughts that you had? I know you didn't have any more positives.
I do have one more. Yeah, I do have one more camp storyline, and it's a positive, actually, and that's Tommy Townsend. Listen, I went to school with a guy named Thomas Townsend, and he was a bully, so I didn't dare call him Tommy, and I sure didn't call him Tommy Rockets. But this Tommy Townsend, I'm down with it, man. Tommy, keep booming the ball and keep trash-talking the opposition and making a muff punts. That's pretty good, too. What has he done? 2 games in a row now that an opponent has muffed punts? So Tommy Townsend is somebody that, was probably under the radar, when the Texans signed him. It's like, well, this guy's had a successful career, but what's he going to do with the Texans? Well, it's only preseason, but right now he's becoming one of my favorite players in camp, actually.
And was out there talking trash against the Steelers after that fumble.
Yeah.
And there's another really good signing by Caserio, who, for the most part, it looks like had an incredible offseason. And I'm overall very happy with where the Texans are right now. But there's guys I'm aching to see out there. And it scares me that we're going into preseason game 3, and there's some guys that we haven't even seen take the field yet in a preseason. I know they're playing in practice and all that, but Steven, I just, to me, it's like, let's see what these guys can do in more of a game situation against opponents that are actually trying to hurt you. Like your own guys typically aren't trying to hurt you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one good piece of news that we heard is that Laramie Tunsil has been cleared to practice. Now, how much will he play in the preseason? Well, probably not very much, but at least he's been cleared to practice. So, that's a big thing because, with this offensive line, if they could just stay healthy, man, that is the biggest issue. But the fact that Laramie Tunsil has been cleared to practice, that's another positive the Texans can put in their cap, or at least right now.
I also want to mention once again, if we did it last week, some people might have missed it. They were on vacation. They thought, oh, this is not going to be real interesting. It's interesting. It's good stuff. Steph Stradley was on with us. Stephen was off last week, so we had Steph on talking about her experience.
Yeah, that was a great show, by the way. I mean, I just loved her telling those stories.
Yeah, the Andre Johnson Hall of Fame week and everything. And I'm going to show for the people that are watching us on YouTube, my niece gave me her Andre Johnson bobblehead that they had at the Astros game on Andre Johnson night.
Awesome.
He's wearing the yellow jacket. He's throwing up the H, which I'm still confused is the H just like a backwards UT Longhorn thing? I don't know. It's just, I kind of wonder what the whole deal is, but it's got the, it's got Andre Johnson 81 at the bottom of the base of it. I wish they had the NFL insignia on the jacket, but I guess that's probably like a copyright thing. I don't know how that works.
Probably.
But anyway, that's pretty cool. And may have to try to make it somewhere in the background of my set here, my fake set. But anyway, go check out the Steph Stradley thing. And in case you missed it, look for the live Steelers Texans postgame show in our live tab on YouTube. Tom Chavaria and I broke it down Friday night. We went a little bit later than we normally would. So in case some of you thought, okay, they're not doing, no, we did it. Just it was a little bit later. And let us know what your take is from the game, or if nothing else, just click the thumbs up to support our content. We want to hear it from you. We want your reaction. We do look at it. All right, Stephen, let's get to the Astros. And I'm curious, from your perspective, which recent Astros call-up has impressed you the most? Is it Zach Dezenzo or Pedro Leon, or maybe neither guy?
Well, I mean, both have had very small sample sizes, but at least, if you take a look at it right now, Zach Dezenzo is in the lead. He's 5 for 16 as of Sunday through the Boston Red Sox series. And, what I like about him, Robert, is his contact so far has been good. 91 miles per hour exit velocity. He's only struck out 3 times. He's only whiffed on 10% of his swings. And, he's been getting a lot of looks at first base. And, John Singleton, he can provide some pop every now and then, but you still want some better production at first base. But it's intriguing because, Dezenzo can play third, he can play first, he can play shortstop. So he's definitely got the versatility you're looking for. What if Alex Bregman walks next year? Are they going to bring up, I still think they're going to bring up Shea Whitcomb in September when, you can increase the roster. So we may get a look at him and see what you've got there. But at least for now, they're giving Dezenzo a lot of time at first base to see what he's made of. He kind of had a little bit of a defensive faux pas in the Red Sox series, but Pedro Leon, he's had 1 for 9 with 5 strikeouts. That's a little bit concerning. It is a small sample size, but when he was tearing it up in the minor leagues and comes in and reality hits him, you're still wondering what you've got with Leon. But at least right now, Dezenzo, I really love the call up.
Yeah, the defensive play you're talking about, the pitcher threw one in the dirt, trying to pick a player off, and then the ball gets by Zach and lets in the run. And, on the broadcast, they said, well, you got to figure out a way to stop that, because if you don't stop it, you got the runner that's going to score at the other end of the diamond. So I it was something, but it's not something that I'm like freaking out. But
he's still learning the position. I mean, he hasn't played that much any more than Loperfido did when they tried him at first base before they traded it. Yeah,
I still want to, we got to see more. He needs some innings over there, but I'm glad they're at least giving this a shot, because John Singleton, great guy, great story, just not the long-term answer. You talked about Pedro Leon's strikeout, 7 Ks, 13 at bats. That's a concern because, making contact was an issue going into this season. He's hitting just 154, no extra base hits so far. We're talking prior to the Tampa game on Monday. He had improved in Sugarland with the strikeout percentage, but so far nothing to get excited about for him. Dezenzo, not ripping the cover off the ball, only hitting 238, but he has a double, a home run. There was a diving catch that prevented another double. Really good play defensively by the Red Sox. But the main thing is going back to the strikeout ratio. 4 Ks, 21 at-bats, as you talked about, Stephen. And there's something about Zach in the batter's box. Maybe it's his stance, maybe it's the swing, but it reminds me of Edgar Martinez. Now, I'm not predicting he's going to turn into Edgar, but just the fact that the way he swings the bat and his stance and everything, it has that similarity. It gives me a little confidence anyway.
Well, Edgar Martinez is a good model to follow. And yeah, I think your numbers were a little more updated than mine. Mine have been, I think, were before Sunday. So I may want to mention that, but still pretty similar. And the fact that he's got that versatility where you can move him around a bit, that obviously is going to help him too. And that home run he hit, I think it was like 436 feet. So he's got some pop. And, all the better for that.
The Astros have 3 very positive storylines with their starting pitchers right now. Stephen, the expectation was that Spencer Arrighetti would be hitting a wall post All-Star break, especially in August. Well, not so fast, because in his 4 post All-Star break starts, he has a 3.60 ERA, 3.10 FIP, and a 198 batting average against. And in his last 2 starts, 25 Ks and 13 innings, the only MLB pitcher this year with back-to-back starts of 12 or more Ks, the only rookie who's done that in American League history.
I mean, the fact that Arrighetti didn't have that much minor league experience, and, he was a bit shaky at the beginning, and I know some people were starting to panic, but, look, you just knew that if you gave the guy time to develop, if he's as highly talented as the Astros say he is, that he was going to come around. I think he's finally finding his stride. Now, can he keep that up through September? That is going to be the big question, because he is hitting as far as his innings limit. So whether he can continue to go there is going to be the big question. But hey, so far, he's definitely finding his groove, and the strikeout rate. I mean, that's really been the key for him, especially in these last couple of starts.
Yeah, and you contrast him a little bit with Ronel Blanco, who's maybe hit the wall a little bit in the last month. You can see the velocity go down somewhat. The batting average against has gone up. So there's some signs that scare you. The ERA's gone up a little bit, but he's fighting through it. I mean, the one thing about Blanco is, that guy's a fighter out there, and you can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think after 1 full year under his belt as a starter, a full-fledged starter, Robert, you kind of hope that maybe next year he can take that next step, someone like a Hunter Brown or some of these other guys are doing, just to get those innings, for those first-year innings out of the way, and then really start establishing yourself in your second year.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to Blanco on something else in a little bit, Stephen. But my number 2 positive starting pitcher storyline is Kikuchi. In 2 starts, a 3.27 ERA, 1.18 WHIP, 179 batting average against. Stephen, what's interesting to me is the Astros' new weapon in reinventing pitchers, like what they have done that's so different. Because with Colin McHugh and Charlie Morton, they had them throwing more high fastballs or curveballs. But Kikuchi is suddenly throwing more off-speed pitch, the same pitch that Blanco's career changed with earlier this year. And it's not necessarily off-speed, but Hunter Brown has this new sinker that's altered his trajectory. The concepts, I Bleav, are all kind of similar. They're all a little bit similar in how they're changing these guys. And it's just real different than they were doing it in the past.
Well, Brent Strom may not be with the Astros anymore, but it still seems like he's leaving his fingerprints on those that replaced him. The 2 pitching coaches. I think you also have to, give some love to the scouting department and pro scouting when they look at these guys, when they're thinking of making a trade, because what's apparently happening is they're tailoring each program, to that specific player and their pitch arsenal. And that's obviously been the case with Kikuchi. Now, he has done well his 2 starts with the Astros, striking out a lot of batters. His swings and misses seem to be better. So far, he's done everything that everybody was hoping he would. And that's certainly good, because the Astros did give up a lot for him. And I understand his walk-up song is "You Say." I think I've heard that Lisa Loeb song. So,
I'm not you sing, man. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not my deal.
I'm going no further than that. You say, Kikuchi. So, yeah, he's definitely been a great addition to the Astros, at least in his first couple starts.
Right. And, we hope we don't jinx it, because he does start tomorrow. And I hope everybody listens to this before tomorrow in case we have somehow screwed it up. At least we look good.
We'll count on the Houston Sports Talk bump, not the jinx, right?
Yeah, we just need that 24 hours where you can enjoy the fact that we had something really good. But the number 3 starting pitching storyline, got to be Justin Verlander, who should be ready to pitch next week, according to my math, Stephen. So it's soon. It's
about time, Robert, because we kept hearing about not only him, but Luis Garcia, Lance McCullers, and this pitcher and that pitcher, and coming back. They're going to come back, or they not? At least at the moment. And again, we don't want to jinx it, because he's still on a rehab assignment. But Justin Verlander rejoining the Astros and pitching well, man, it couldn't come at a better time, especially, when you're talking about some of these guys like Blanco, maybe tapping out a little bit. They need Justin Verlander to come in and fill up some of those innings. And of course, pitch effectively the way Justin Verlander is used to doing.
Right. And I don't know if we can jinx it any more than the Astros try to jinx it every time somebody gets hurt. Well, he's going to be back. She should just be a couple of days, I think, and then 3 years later. Well, I think he died like about 2 years ago, and we forgot to tell you about that. And he's never going to be. It's like we can't. I don't think we can do a better job of jinxing than the Astros.
No, definitely not. And I think we can have a funeral for Lance McCullers' arm, at least for this season, because he's definitely not coming back. So we can start the organ music and you can go from there.
Justin Verlander, if he comes back next week, Stephen, what would you do? Do you go to a 6-man rotation? Do you maybe sit Blanco down for a couple of starts, maybe take one person out? And Blanco seems like the obvious guy right now with, how he's kind of hit a wall. How would you handle that?
I would do both. Yeah, Blanco would be the guy I would sit out for sure. But I would do both. After that, maybe skip him a start, put him back in, and then do the 6-man rotation. I think that will help everybody across the board. Especially because we don't know. How much is Verlander? How long is he going to be able to go per start? That's the other question you have to look at. So if you can give him a little bit more rest, say rest Blanco one start, and then start a 6-man rotation, at least for now, and see how that goes.
We talked earlier about the magic fairy dust that the Astros pitching staff has done to some of these guys, just real magic stuff. And that leads me to this, Stephen. I wanted to ask you, what do you make of Caleb Ort and Bryan King? The 32-year-old journeyman Ort has a .38 whip in 5 appearances. The 27-year-old third-round draft pick King has a 1.02 whip in 16 appearances. Is this real?
Well, this just seems, the Astros keep doing this over and over, Robert. There's always, one, maybe 2 guys that, remember in the pandemic year, you take a guy like Brooks Raley. For goodness sake, what did Brooks Raley ever do before he was with the Astros? Really not much. And, guys like that. And yeah, now you're talking about Caleb Ort and Bryan King, who nobody was talking about even a couple months ago. Both of them have come in, and you talk about being great in an Astros bullpen that has really needed it. Those 2 guys have absolutely provided that for them.
I haven't looked at the number of innings that they've pitched where there's been real stuff at stake. Stephen, do you think a lot of this is just, they've come in a lot and blowouts, they're the blowout guys, or have they come in? Bryan King's coming in more and more, I think, with stuff at stake.
Yeah, Bryan King has come in several times more. Caleb Ort, I think, is mainly your mop-up guy right now, just to see what you've got. But there may come a point where you might want to put him in a situation, with a little more on the line to see how he does. Because really, ultimately, Robert, if you're going to talk about postseason rosters and, toward the end of the season, you got to know what these guys are made of. Obviously, the Astros are in a very tight pennant race, and you don't want to mess it up too much. But you got to see what these guys are made of at some point.
I'm just going to ignore Caleb Ferguson for now. Let's just ignore it. Pretend like he doesn't exist at all. And
that's what the Yankees were trying to do.
Yeah, well, they got him to not exist on our roster and move him over. Thankfully, Yordan's back to being Yordan. And Stephen, can we just take a second to appreciate an Astros starting catcher who can flat out hit the baseball? In Yainer's last 41 games, let me just throw some numbers at you. 365, 901 OPS. More importantly, let me go to his clutch stats for the season, which are about the same as he's done the last 41 games. And with runners in scoring position, he's hitting 353, so nearly the 365 average. And his OPS is 902. This is not Castro, Osmus, Maldi. This is different.
No, you're talking Real Muto and those guys. You're talking those kind of figures, Robert. And I will happily eat crow, because if you remember, in our Astros preview to start the season, and we're talking about Astros that could be in for a down year, or at least, Astros you might be concerned about. One of my biggest concerns was whether Diaz could hit the way he did last year, especially with taking on the full catcher responsibilities behind the plate. Was his sophomore season, are we going to see a dip in his hitting? Well, certainly since the All-Star break, we have not seen that. And man, has it been welcome. It is head and shoulders above what we've had in the last few years as far as offensive catching goes. So, oh man, it's been great to see with him.
You forgot one thing. You forgot to thank Dusty. We always have to thank Dusty. Remember
Dusty for that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Dusty.
Yeah. He's the guy that knew that, you don't start Yainer until year 2, because even though he's hitting great in year 1, you could screw him up for years and years if you let him hit, and knock the cover off the baseball. Whatever. I don't know. I don't get it. But
whatever it is, it's working. Keep going.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just a couple of notes about the Sugarland Space Cowboys. Their record, as we speak, 73-40, 33 games over 500. It's the best winning percentage in minor league baseball this year. So maybe you should get out and see some Sugarland Space Cowboys. They had 8 walk-offs, by the way, this year as well. Don't start throwing a celebration for this part yet, But in Sugarland, Forrest Whitley's last 14 outings, 14 and 2/3 innings. Have you seen what his ERA is in those 14 and 2/3 innings, Stephen?
It's gone down quite a bit. I mean, I've been kind of keeping an eye on him, and I mean, it's down in the twos now, isn't it? Or just about.
Well, his ERA in that inning stretch is 0. 0.000.
Yeah, it's zero there, but yeah, and it's brought it way down from like almost double figures when the season started.
17 strikeouts, 4 walks. I mean, once he's got healthy and back into the groove, it's just it's the old bugaboo. It's like, can you keep him healthy? As soon as he gets healthy, it's almost like we got to bring him up right now, because in 2 weeks he could get hurt again. So we got to get like maybe 3 innings out of him or something like that. Like there's maybe a spot on this roster as good as Caleb Ort and Bryan King have been. I mean, they're still, you need as many bullpen guys as possible. And of course, I mean, I think he should be up in September, but maybe before that, who knows?
Well, he might be. And honestly, and that's a big F, let's, knock on wood with that. If he can stay healthy until that period, I definitely think you'll see him in September. And I definitely think you'll see him pitch. And he's making, 1-2 inning appearances. But yeah, he's definitely been somebody I've been keeping my eye on. But I keep holding, every outing, I kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, that's one more outing where not only was he effective, but he stayed healthy. So he just has to keep that going.
Anything else Astro related that caught your eye in the last, I guess we haven't talked in a couple of weeks. So
well, the offense certainly has come to life, toward the end of the Texas series and certainly in the Boston series, despite the fact that the Astros outfield has been a bit subpar, Robert. If you look at, you look at Chas McCormick, who's really been struggling all season, so I guess there's no surprise there. But you look at Mauricio Dubon, you look at Jake Myers, all 3 of those guys are hitting below 200 since July 1st. I mean, it is a bit concerning. Thank goodness that Yordan Alvarez has, been keeping things up. But you want to see a little more production from some of the Astros outfielders, especially Dubon and Myers, who was on a hot streak for quite a while, and he's finally cooled off a bit. So, and of course, the absence of Tucker, you wonder, when is Kyle Tucker coming back? Well, not at the moment, because he's still having problems with that shin. I mean, if the Astros outfielders can get back to more consistency they've had, then the offense is really going to put it in high gear, I think.
Well, it's also the domino effect of those guys not playing well has made Alvarez into a regular left fielder. He's out there nearly every game because you want to have Yainer out there, and Caratini's been better as far as hitting goes than any of the outfielders have been recently, outside of Yordan, of course. And then you look at, okay, so now what does that do to your defense? Because Yordan not as good defensively as some of those other guys. You don't want him to play too much left field. You're trying to avoid injury. That, like I said, the defense, but also one of the things that we're seeing, Stephen, is late in the game, they want to bring Yordan out if they have a lead because he's not as good defensively as maybe a Chas McCormick is or Mauricio Dubon. So it's a scary prospect whenever you take Yordan out of the game because he's the straw that stirs the drink, obviously.
Well, yeah, especially in a close game. I mean, what if he ties the game and then you go into extra innings and you're going to need his bat? So that's always a risk that you run. But it's just something to keep an eye on as we get into the home stretch of the season.
We can't leave without congratulating all the Houston athletes who won Olympic medals. And I mean, if we were a country, I'm guessing we would be somewhere up atop the whole thing. I mean, it's a pretty impressive list. Simone Biles, Jordan Childs, who of course trains with Simone in spring. They both won the gold in the all-around. Simone won the gold they both won gold in the team. And then of course, Simone won it in the all-around. Jordan, at the moment, last I heard, they have stolen her bronze. That's a whole other story. I'm not super happy about that. It's like, in Major League Baseball, it would almost be the equivalent of 3 days later, you know what? We screwed up that one call, Stephen. We're going to change that win to a. You can't do. It's a bad
you don't
precedent.
Do that in pro sport. Yeah, that's the thing that got me. And you got international federations fighting with each other over this whole thing. That's kind of silly.
Also in gymnastics, of course, bronze medalist Asher Hong, who trains in tomball, who Stephen covered. We talked about him a couple of weeks ago. In the 3 meters synchronized diving, you had Cassidy Cook, silver medalist from the Woodlands, won the first medal of the Olympics. You got a gold and silver medalist in men's 4x4 and 4x4 mixed with Bryce Dedman from Ridgepoint High School.
Yeah.
In basketball, you got the gold medalist Brittany Griner, who I covered when she was dunking basketballs at Nimitz. You have the silver medalist swimmer in the 4x1 and the 4x2, Simone Manuel, and a silver medalist indoor volleyball player, Avery Skinner from Katy. And just the stories from these, just incredible Stephen, you already talked a little bit about Asher Hung a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows the Simone Biles story at this point, but Simone Manuel, basically, she was not swimming hardly at all. She would swim 24 meters after the 2021 Tokyo Olympics and just be out of gas because she had overtraining syndrome. She had to relearn from scratch. And it took her the whole 2 years leading up to the Olympics for her to get back to where she was. I mean, it's just an amazing comeback for her, even though like she didn't have the Olympics that, we remember from 2016 where she was fantastic. For her to come back and do what she did, it's really special. Just a lot of really fantastic stories among the Houston athletes, and can't be more proud. Of course, Brittany Griner, she was in jail for a year, and Rush probably thought her life could be over with. And she gets back and she's back to playing basketball and she's back to, doing special things out there.
That's one of the other great things about the Olympics that I enjoy, Robert, not just the performances, but the stories, because every athlete has a story. And I know the Olympics are over, but the Paralympics are coming up. And I'm doing a kind of a personal plug here just because I cover Paralympic sports for Team USA. You talk about stories. These athletes have stories too. So I encourage everybody to give the Paralympics a watch. They're August 28th through September 8th, of course, in Paris, same venue, same place as the Olympics, because a lot of these athletes have overcome even more than your Olympic athletes have. And I've done stories on several of them. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye out for it. So yeah, it's the performances, obviously, but it's also the stories that could just send chills up your spine. And not just, for athletes here in the Houston area, but really any of them that you see, they've all got some pretty neat stories to tell.
Yeah, go check Steven's timeline. He's written extensively about some of the Paralympics athletes over the years. And I think this year we should just call it the Paris Olympics, right? Just instead of the Paralympics.
Paris Olympics. Yeah, you could, because that's where it is. Same venue.
And just really, I cannot express enough how fantastic it was to watch the Olympics in Paris. It should be there. Just make that the regular home of this summer. It's such a beautiful, breathtaking sight. And the venues, I mean, the swimming was as loud as I've ever heard any venue.
I know. I watched that too. And obviously a lot of people agree with you, Robert, because the viewership was up for this Olympics. It had been kind of going down the last few years, but I think a lot of people were intrigued like you were and like I was, Robert, with the whole Paris thing, because viewership went up for this year's Olympics.
Yeah, we always talk about the Americans, but boy, I saw something I'll never see again in Olympic history. On Sunday, the women's marathoner, she won with a world record time. And you're like, okay, yeah, they set world records in marathon. That's not a big deal. She also won a bronze in the 5K and the 10K that week. So she won 3 medals, one in the 5K, one in the 10K, and then topped it off by setting a world record in the marathon on one of the most difficult courses that you will see for a marathon, uphill a lot of the way, a pretty good incline, which is really unusual for most marathon courses. And, she's somebody that she's won medals before, and she probably thought, okay, I'll be happy just maybe if I can finish the race on Sunday. But, she turned it on at the end of the race, Stephen, and she elbowed her one person that she was running with towards the end, sort of out of the way so she could make a little. It wasn't a malicious thing. I think she tried to make the pass, and the girl didn't know she was going to try to make the pass. And sort of
a little bit too narrow spot.
Maybe
there.
Weaved back into. I didn't see that. I didn't see her get upset after the race, but I mean, it's amazing. She's I think born in Ethiopia, but grew up from 15 onwards in the Netherlands, so competes for the Netherlands. But that's something that was just amazing. And the other athletes that did incredible stuff that weren't American, I think we saw Marshawn start to be the next Michael Phelps.
Yeah, I watched him on several occasions. He looked really good in the pool.
And then we saw the best, I think it's the best pole vaulter we might ever see in that Mongo, the guy who's went to LSU, grew up in the United States, but was competing for Sweden. His mother's from Sweden. He won the thing, Steve. I don't know if you saw this. He wins, and it's basically over with, but he's like, no, I want to go for the world record. And
that part I didn't see.
He ends up he's like, okay, I'm going to just get the world record. And again, just like the swimming track, it was electric. It was absolutely electric in there and unreal.
Yeah, I tell you, you almost wish the Olympics weren't over. You just wanted to keep the momentum going because, yeah, it's over a 2-week period. I'm sure the athletes are ready to go home, but some great performances. And like I said, looking forward to the Paralympics. There is a Houston guy. He is in New York now, but he's from Houston, Robert, that I want to keep his name in mind. Shea Foster did a story on him. So I'm going to keep an eye on him in these upcoming Paralympics. But yeah, lots of people, lots of athletes from the Houston area competed in this year's Olympics. So we're proud of each and every one of them and proud of Team USA for all the medals they won.
Is there a website we can go to, Stephen, and just type your name and some of your stories on the Paralympics will come up?
Well, the Team USA is where they go. I haven't done one in a while, so this one will be coming out probably another week or so. In the next podcast, I'll try to put it in the show notes for you.
But all those are up on their site, right?
Yeah,
right
they
now.
should. Some of them are. A lot of them have been taken down, so there may be one or two up there. But if you do a search of my name and Team USA, you might come up with a couple.
Sounds great. Thanks again for hanging in there with me, and we'll do this again next week. And of course, our live Texans post game is this Saturday, the third preseason.
It's going to be a day game for a preseason. That's kind of unusual, isn't it?
Yeah. So is it a noon start? Is it noon start?
Yeah, noon start against the Giants. That's right.
Looking forward to that. More Astros. Keep this momentum up for sure. And hopefully we should have Justin Verlander maybe back by the next time we record. I don't know, but we're going to see. We'll talk again soon.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.